the Braves Clubhouse Report.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Braves Clubhouse Report with you Wednesdays, 2 to 2:30. Right here on your home of the Braves, the Fan 680 and 93.7 FM. Alongside Wiley Ballard, Kevin McAlpin here with you till the bottom of the hour, getting you up to speed on all things Braves as they close out the regular season. Just 5 games left to go. They'll wrap things up on Sunday afternoon, get a few days off, and turn their attention to the National League Division Series that starts a week from Saturday right here at Truist Park. Wiley Ballard, very excited for a Wednesday afternoon.
Welcome to the wheelhouse.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to have you in studio with us.
I am excited to be here. I think we've been waiting a long time to get to the cusp of the postseason, and we're finally in the final homestand. Man, what a win last night. I'm curious to say as Suzuki has crawled out of the hole he climbed into last night after dropping that fly ball. And I think it shows yet again that the Braves offense is just truly never out of a game. And I think that should give Braves fans a lot of comfort going into the postseason. On the flip side, I know the pitching has some questions right now, and Bryce Elder didn't necessarily quell any of them last night.
Yeah, I know that a lot of folks were excited to see his team erase a 6-run deficit. At the same time, like you said, it does highlight there are some issues when it comes to the starting rotation. We know Charlie Morton is out for the NLDS. We keep our fingers crossed, no pun intended, that Max Fried is good to go, and this blister issue has plenty of time to cool down. But then it leads to, okay, who is your number 3 starter? And I think it's probably still Bryce Elder, unless you decide, hey, maybe it's a bullpen game. Maybe we do the opener thing. Remember, the Braves did that a couple of times and won a World Series by doing that a couple of years ago with Tucker Davidson and Dylan Lee starting 2 of those 6 games. So I'm with you. I think there's a lot of exciting things that happen. But again, I think there's some uneasiness to say the least with the fan base when it comes to the rotation right now.
Well, first and foremost, the National League Division Series, the way it is scheduled with days off and everything else, a lot of Braves fans already know this, but you can start Max Fried and Spencer Strider twice. Now, again, that's assuming Fried's good to go. To me, I'm not convinced that it wouldn't be Strider in Game 1 just because of how well he's pitched against the Phillies.
Yeah.
And then if it gives Fried another day or two, perhaps he could go on Monday, October 9th. And then at that point, you can bring them both back for Game 4 and Game 5. And truthfully, Kevin, just with what we've seen from Max Fried in the postseason, I go back to Game 6 of the World Series. I know he had a tough one against Philadelphia last year, a little under the weather, but he's put up some pretty big performances in the postseason. I kind of like having him in a winner-take-all Game 5 that I think you and I both hope is not a factor. Just go ahead and win that series in 3 or 4 games. Don't play that winner-take-all game, even though it would be at Truist Park. And then you get to the NLCS, and hopefully Charlie Morton's back and available to you. But to me, just seeing how this team has handled the postseason, how a lot of teams handle the postseason, I think the opener in Game 3 is a distinct possibility, especially because Jesse Chavez has had success in that role. And you talked about the 2021 World Series. Dylan Lee, maybe he wasn't great in that role in that start, but man, Kyle Wright coming out of the bullpen. I know Kyle talked about it on Sunday after he had 3 innings out of the pen, was pretty good against the Nats. I'm comfortable in that role, and I like the idea of Kyle Wright. I think you're going to need him to pitch at least 3, maybe even 4 innings over the course of a postseason series, and that might be best in Game 3 when you don't have a Strider or a Fried.
Here's the good thing, as far as Kyle's concerned, and I know he hasn't pitched as well as anybody had hoped when he came back, and of course he had to ramp things up a little bit quicker too with some moving parts in the rotation, but he's only thrown 28 2/3 innings this year. So if I can get a fresh arm, I'm looking at Max Fried in the same conversation where Fried's only, around 80, 85 innings this season. If you have those 2 guys gassed up the way they could be for the playoffs, like you said, if you can get 3 innings out of a Kyle Wright. We know Bryce Elder's splits first 2 times through are pretty good, but that 3rd time through, the numbers go skyrocket as far as what opponents do to him. So I guess what I'm getting at is you have 2 guys who have not pitched a lot. Throw Jesse in that conversation. Throw Jackson Stevens in there as well. Those are 4 guys right there that are probably fresher than they've ever been at any point, down the stretch in a season, where I think that very well is an option where you go, you know what? Let's just try to figure it out. Get us a couple of good innings, and we'll hopefully put our high leverage guys in the back of the pen how we see fit.
Well, and, I think that's another example, Kevin, of why this is such a long season. It's a marathon, and those guys weren't available in the meat of it. They had to lean pretty heavily on Bryce Elder. And, that's why I feel pretty strongly that even if you're not on the postseason roster, you should get a World Series ring, which, of course, is the case. Because it takes a lot, not just to win those games in October, but to get to those games in October and to be in the position where you have home field. And I guess this is kind of a long way of saying, Bryce Elder may not be on a postseason roster at this point. I mean, he's walked 9 guys in his last 2 starts. He just hasn't had the command. I was looking at the velocity. It's pretty similar to where he has been. Not that he's a velocity-dependent pitcher by any means, but it just has felt like, they've taxed him so heavily, and he was one of the reasons the Braves got out to such a big lead there in the month of June and July without Fried, without Wright. But, you need multiple pieces over the course of a season to help get you to where you need to go. And I do think Kyle Wright, we got spoiled watching Max Fried come back in Chicago. He hadn't pitched in 3 months, and boom, it's like, 6-7 scoreless up at Wrigley. That's not the norm. For me, I think every time Kyle Wright goes out there, he gets closer and closer to being ready to go. And to put it really bluntly, Kevin, I'm not sure you have a better option at your disposal, at least for the NLDS. If Charlie Morton's out, Bryce Elder, again, I can't have a guy who's spraying the ball. A walk is a rally. You hear it all the time. You can't afford to add extra base runners. I feel like Kyle Wright, at least at this point, is having more success throwing strikes than Bryce. And we were talking to Matt Chernoff about it, before we went on. But, I mean, the real question is, okay, who can you get or how can you get to the 6th inning of Game 3? Right? Mm-hmm. How, again, assuming Fried and Strider go Game 1 and 2 or in some order, how can you take care of those first 15 to 18 outs in Game 3 if you're not going to have, a starter you trust that can eat up the majority of that? That's going to be the question facing Braves management, and that'll depend largely on what happens in Game 1 and Game 2. Yeah,
and again, to your point about Strider, you look at his career numbers against Philadelphia, 8-0 in 8 appearances, 7 starts, a 1.90 ERA, 72 strikeouts in 47 1/3 innings. And I think, again, when you talk about a lineup, Philly's a very deep lineup. They're a very good ball club. They're playing good baseball right now. If you have a guy like Strider that can go out and set the tone and, have the ability to put up double-digit strikeouts, that's a team that will swing and miss quite a bit. I don't know that there's a wrong answer, whether you look at whether you look at a Strider or Fried and Strider. I do like, though, having the ability for my ace to pitch a potential Game 5, or if that's not a factor, then he's on the hill for Game 1 of a championship series.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say we get to a Game 5. That means you either were up 2-1, you gave Strider a hack at it. Again, if Strider goes Game 4, I think you still feel pretty confident in him going against the Phillies. In worst case, you come back home, play Game 5. Yeah. If you're down 2-1, well, if Strider starts Game 4, you have to win both of them anyway, so it doesn't really matter which order you pitch him in. So that's why the more and more I think about it, I think Strider is probably a good fit for Game 1, especially factoring in the blister, just to give Fried an extra, even if it's 36 hours, depending on the game times. I think that could make a difference.
Really could. Braves picked up their 101st win last night, and we'll take you inside the clubhouse in our next segment. We'll hear from Snit, Kevin Pillar, and Bryce Elder. We'll get to that coming up here in just a little while. But I did want to sort of look back on how the Braves won that ball game last night. Of course, Kevin Pillar has the solo homer. The offense was really stagnant last night. Not a whole lot going on. Hits the solo shot. That got the Braves on the board 6-1. RBI single from Matt Olson. RBI double from Marcell Ozuna. Wiley, Marcel's up to 91 RBI. He's going to have 100 RBI on the season before this thing is all said and done. Ronald Acuna, his 41st of the season, and it really just felt like, the momentum really started to shift in that 6th and 7th inning. And then Seiya Suzuki, man, one of those plays, he's made that play 1,000 times. He could probably catch that ball again in his sleep if he has to, but it shows you, walk guys, give extra outs. I mean, let's be honest, those 2 walks from Drew Smiley. I mean, you can say what you want about Suzuki making the errors, but the walks, those were self-inflicted wins for losses, self-inflicted injuries, I should say, for the Cubs last night.
And again, that goes back to my thing of I want to prioritize a strike thrower in the postseason. I really do, especially when you're going to have the best offense in any series you play. You don't need to help out an offense that is, slightly less than yours by giving them free passes. You speak of Seiya Suzuki in his sleep. I can promise you, as he was sleeping last night, that he kept dropping that ball every time it appeared in his dreams. I promise you. But look, I'll sit here and say this, and I'm sure Cubs fans don't want to hear it. And, don't get me wrong, winning the way they did last night was exciting and dramatic. And, I mean, man, talk about just a massive miscue. Who's to say the Braves don't win that thing an inning later? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, Cubs, I'm sure, would sit there. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. The Cubs would prefer to have that opportunity to be 3 outs away. But how many – I know that was the largest comeback from the Braves this season as far as being down by 6 or more runs. But how many times have we seen the Braves like, okay – a normal team, you'd probably say they got about a 10% chance of coming back. With the Braves, you feel like you're down 3 in the 7th. You go, 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that's something that I've been excited to see. I think way back early in May, maybe we were a little concerned, okay, they're not scoring as much late. That hasn't been an issue lately. And part of the reason this lineup is so relentless is because of how quickly it turns over. Mm-hmm. And you get more and more bats for your guys at the top. Not that they're that much better than the guys at the bottom, but that's, again, why the walks. If anybody walks this Braves team in the postseason like Drew Smyly did, you have no shot. I mean, you really have no shot. I think if you're going in to face this Braves team as an opponent, you've got to pitch them aggressively. And again, you're still not comfortable doing that. But I think if you add walks to this group with their team speed, how about this number for you? The Braves lead baseball in first to thirds this year.
How about that?
And again, I know we talk so much about the extra base power and home runs and doubles and all those things, but simple singles, the Braves have so much team speed, A, and how about this too? This is hardly surprising because the Braves have the most power in baseball, but no team has opposing outfielders play deeper against them than the Braves. So when you have that little duck snort single, I mean, Orlando Arcia, how many times has he just feathered one over the right side of the infield? Not only do you have a guy maybe like, I don't know, Ozzie Albies at first base or Michael Harris at first base, not only do they have good speed, but that right fielder has to run 10, 15 feet further to go get the ball because he's playing so deep against this Braves offense.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable to see the way. Again, you give them an inch, they take a mile.
Yeah.
And you make a mistake like they did in the 8th inning, whether it's the walks or the error, combination of both, you give this team extra outs. We've said that against opponents the Braves have played over the years where their margin of error was small. You can't afford to put, you got to play 27 outs. You make it 28, 29, you're going to be in big trouble, and that's what the Cubs saw last night.
And Ronald Acuna Jr., I mean, he himself is the epitome of power and speed, but I think that goes across the whole lineup, really, in most cases. Look, I mean, I know Matt Olson's not a burner. I know, Orlando may not be the biggest power hitter, but I just look at the way this team operates offensively. They have 3 or 4 different ways they can get an extra base. Mm-hmm. 1, hit the ball to the ballpark. 2, scorch one in the gap to where even if they're playing deep, it's still got so much zip on it, it splits the gap and gets to the wall. 3, steal a base. I mean, we've seen that obviously with Ronald and Michael Harris. 4, as I said, first to third. You take an extra base on a ground ball single. So that's what makes this team so difficult in my mind to try and keep runs off the board is because you can't just focus in on one extra base area and feel like that's enough. I mean, they can beat you in every way a team can beat you offensively.
And a lot of teams have seen that on the wrong end, 101 times to be exact here.
And
this
they don't
year.
strike out that much.
They don't. And I think that to me is when you start crunching numbers, especially with Ronald, you're talking Ronald and Mookie and comparing numbers. 81 strikeouts to 79 walks for Ronald this year? It's amazing how he has cut down on the swing and miss. And I don't think that's any surprise that you look up and down this lineup. Matt Olson, remember the first couple of months was going to just set the world on fire with strikeouts. He's brought that level down. So I think putting the ball in play, all these outs aren't created equal either. And again, I think that ability to stay aggressive but also not be punching out like they have in years past, I think that's huge for this team.
And I think you've brought in some guys who are not going to strike out. I mean, look, Dansby Swanson, part of a World Series championship team. That guy had so many big swings. I mean, he's going to go down as in my book is a lot of Braves fans, one of their favorites because he's a local kid, right? Said all that. He had some strikeout issues, and he still does. I mean, we saw it last night there in the 9th inning. He's got some strikeout issues, and look, his defense, I still think I think you look at some of the advanced metrics, he's one of the best shortstops in baseball. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't a valuable player to have, but I do think that's a piece of it as well, is the strikeouts have been cut down. You plug in Orlando Arcia as more contact-oriented, but I mean, I think you look at anybody on this Braves roster, nobody's going to have more to do with the strikeouts going down than Ronald Acuna Jr. Yeah. I mean, his strikeout rate's cut in half. So he's responsible for a large part of that. And I'm a big believer the MVP award is as much a narrative award as it is a strictly stats and measuring and, sort of trying to put it to scale of who matches up against who. And to me, Ronald coming back from injury, playing for the best team in the sport, in the year they changed the rules for stolen bases are way up. Nobody's capitalized more on that than he is. And then you add in the 40-40, 40-70, whatever you want to call it. I just don't see how that doesn't get you up to a point where you're the MVP.
Yeah.
I mean, if Mookie was beating him out in categories by a large margin, then okay, maybe that's a different conversation. But if this is really as neck and neck as some people say it is, and I'd argue it's not quite as neck and neck as that. I think Ronald's a little bit further ahead. But even if you want to sit there and say, oh, they're neck and neck, well, best team in baseball, 68 stolen bases the year they changed the rule. Stolen bases are up. Like, that's the story of this season, is speed has come back into the sport. And I think the MVP should reflect that.
I think it will. I think ultimately it will end up reflecting that as Ronald gets closer and closer to taking home those honors. All right, listen, when we come back, we're going to hear from Brian Snitker, also Kevin Pillar, get their reaction after last night's 7-6 come-from-behind win. And, of course, later on we'll check in with Matt Chernoff. That as we continue on the Braves Clubhouse Report right after this here on The Fan.
The Braves Clubhouse Report on 680 The Fan.
Kevin and Wiley with you here. The Braves Clubhouse Report continues as we get you set for the Braves and the Cubs Game 2 of their 3-game series coming up tonight from Truist Park in Atlanta. Braves going for win number 102 on the season, looking to surpass last year's total of 101. And obviously they got some momentum on their side following last night's 7-6 victory, a game that saw the Braves down 6-0 as they came to bat in the bottom of the 6th, but 3 in the 6th, 2 more in the 7th, and a couple of more in the 8th translates to a 7-6 win for the Braves. So let's hear from Brian Snitker first, get his thoughts on what was one of the bigger comebacks this team's seen in quite some time.
Especially a guy like that, the starter. I mean, he is such a good starter, good stuff to kind of just hang in there. And, it's kind of like you feel, keep the game close, then they see him a couple of times, they might have a chance. I mean, he's really good, and I love the way we came roaring back.
And they've done that so many times, Wiley, over the years where, look, 6-0 is a little bit different animal in the 6th inning, but you almost just have come to expect that this team's, no matter what the score is, they're going to fight, they're going to scratch, they're going to claw, and it felt like Pillar's home run really sort of maybe woke up the dugout a little bit last night.
There are teams who are going to scratching in a claw. I mean, look, this is professional baseball, and I'm not saying it's happening in every dugout. I mean, I know there's been a lot of shade thrown at some of the teams like the White Sox and the Padres as far as how hard they go at it on a given night. But I think the majority of teams really do, from just a professional standpoint. If nothing else, they're trying to help their stats regardless of the score, right? So I think there's a lot of scratching and clawing going on across the league. The difference is the Braves not only scratch and claw, but they also have so much stinking talent offensively that they're normally able to actually complete the comeback.
Right.
And that's where I go back to. It's again, on top of the talent, it's the expectation to win, it's the vibe, it's there's just so much confidence. I'd argue no matter who's in the playoffs, the team that is going to be the most difficult to rattle or shake their confidence is this Braves team, because they've had so much success, not just this year, but the last number of years, World Series championship. I mean, I'd argue even the Astros got to feel a little rattled. They just got swept by Kansas City, and those games actually mean something for the Astros. So I think, again, for me, from where I sit, I'd put the Phillies up there too. They're a pretty tough group. They got some talent offensively. I really think they're probably the next best team in the National League, which is why it's going to be interesting to see if they make it to that wild card series. You could have what feels like a pennant series in the division series. But again, to Snit's point, just the mentality and the confidence, they've been there before and they've had a lot of success. Why not do it again?
Yeah, and they've done that so many times under his leadership. Like I said, six runs is a lot, but obviously this team is never out of a ball game, and that's exactly what you saw again last night. All right, one more from Snit, as obviously one of the unsung heroes of last night's ball game was the collective group coming out of the bullpen last night. Jackson Stevens, Pierce Johnson, Brad Hand, Raisel Iglesias, and for me, Jackson Stevens, the biggest one last night. 2 1/3. He gives up 4 hits, 1 run, no walks, and no strikeouts. So here was Snit talking about how Jackson helped keep this team in the ballgame.
Jackson did a great job of coming in, kind of stabilizing things, keeping, even just coming back in the 1 inning. Once we got a little closer, we had some guys really that I needed to pitch, and he did a great job of kind of getting us to the 7th inning. That's kind of what you want.
And that's what you really ask of these guys, Wiley, is just keep it there. I know we've dug ourselves a hole. I know the starter couldn't get through 4 innings, but if you can just keep the ball game manageable, keep it within striking distance, that's exactly what Jackson did last night.
And I think he could be one of those pieces you use in a game 3. If you get a short start, you go with an opener. Maybe it is Jackson Stevens, but he's a guy, in my mind, we were talking about Matt's point about trying to find a way to get to the 6th in that 3rd game. I think Jackson could be a big piece of that. I mean, I'd classify 3 of his 4 outings this year as really solid. He went 3 2/3, 1 run at Philly, 3 scoreless at Miami, and then 2 1/3 last night. He had the 1 blip against Washington this past weekend, but outside of that, he's looking about as trustworthy as anybody in that pen beneath, the upper tier guys like an Iglesias or a Minter.
And both those guys look good here lately. Raisel last night punching out Suzuki and Swanson with the tying run on base, so that was good to see. All right, one more. We mentioned Kevin Pillar's homer really kind of get the Braves kick-started offensively last night, and he had a great front row view to the error that led to 2 runs in the 8th. So here's Pillar just talking about that error and the big comeback win for the Braves.
As a player, you just kind of see it through, and you just assume the out's going to be made when it's dropped, you're pretty excited about it because, we fought hard to come back in that game, and winning big league games is tough. Maybe people outside this room take it for granted, with the amount of wins we have, but they're not easy to come by. Every time you step on a field, no matter who you're playing, the other team's trying to win. It's much harder to win games than it is to lose games at this level.
And remember, Wiley, this is a Cubs team that's fighting to hold off Miami when it comes to that final wild card spot. Fish are just a half game back with 5 games left to be played. So very interesting times when it comes to those final couple of spots. We know Philly has locked up the top wild card spot, but you've got the Diamondbacks, Cubs, Marlins, and the Reds. They're only a game and a half back, so still not ruling out Cincinnati making a push here in the final couple of days as well.
Yeah, I think Cincy's going to have a tough time getting in unless they run the table, which is possible. I'm not trying to say it's not. In Chicago, again, they got 2 more here in Atlanta against the Braves offense. We'll see how the pitching unfolds, and then they go to Milwaukee. So they got a tough assignment on their hands. And as I understand it, Miami has the tiebreakers, I think, over all those teams.
Wow.
I'm confirming that right now. But I'm telling you what, Miami is very much alive in this. And they have a huge doubleheader today against the Mets.
Yeah, they were not happy to get that game rained out last night in New York. I don't know if you saw, there was a piece on The Athletic. Ken Rosenthal had some comments made by folks in the Marlins organization, not happy the Mets didn't tarp the field in time. It rained a couple of days, unplayable conditions. And, of course, like you said, they're fighting for a postseason spot. Now they got to play a doubleheader here today. So it'd be very interesting to see how that plays out. But, again, they're taking on a Mets team that's not very good, but it is still hard to sweep a doubleheader like they're going to have to try to do today.
It is, and they do have the tiebreaker over the Diamondbacks, the Cubs. They split the series with the Reds, but from what I've read, they have the tiebreaker over the Reds.
There you go. How about that? Math down the stretch.
Hey, it is that time of year, man.
Yes,
and look,
it is.
After we get through Sunday, we can throw the math away and just see who's better at baseball.
Yep, everybody's 0-0 starting on Sunday evening. All right, when we return, one guy who's not 0-0, we'll talk to Matt Chernoff. We'll find out what's coming up on the big program this afternoon. We'll get to that, and we'll close as we continue on the Braves Clubhouse Report right after this on The Fan.
This is the Braves Clubhouse Report, exclusively on 680 The Fan.
Braves and Cubs, Game 2 coming up tonight from Truist Park here in Atlanta, 7:20 Eastern. Darius Vines on the mound for the Braves here tonight. Of course, that means our coverage starts on the Ford Leadoff Show this evening, 6:05 Eastern, 5:05 Central, as Davino and I will walk you up to first pitch and get you set for Game 2, Braves and Cubs on a Wednesday night here at Truist Park. These days off, when you get the Monday off, it just throws off my whole week. 157 games in. I couldn't tell you what day it is. It's just all right, what time are we on? What time is the game? Dates don't even matter anymore.
2 types of days: day game, night game.
That's exactly. Or off day. And there's off days every now and then.
Yeah, rarely.
I'm ready. I'm ready for a couple off days next week. I'm not going to lie to you. One guy who never takes a day off is the guy sitting to my right. Hello, Matthew.
I'm a warrior, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm like a Cal Ripken. There's no days off around here. Belichick said it to his team. I believe it.
How close are we to getting you a daily Instagram post where you're talking about no days off in the gym kind of thing?
It could be there. There could be a selfie in there. I don't know about a gym. I mean, look at me. I don't know if you need that, but you could have me at a bakery. No days off. I'm at a Crumble. Ooh, a sales is listening. Matt here for Crumble.
It's a natural tie. I like it.
I mean, it's just there's an endorsement opportunity around every corner.
I love it. Last night, obviously, a lot of good and maybe a little not as good from Bryce Elder last night. Where do you sort of stand on? We were discussing this in the hallway before we came on air. God, what do you do with that third spot in the rotation now?
So, because the schedule works out for the Braves in the division series, the baseball scheduling gods worked out for them. You would only need another guy besides Spencer and Max, as long as Max's blister is okay, and we're going to hope it is. I think you got to go with the bullpen game in Game 3. And because the schedule works out, you're going to have a rested pen throughout that series. I just don't know how you can trust Bryce. And this is not a 1 or 2, 3 start thing. The last 3 have been especially bad. This is going back to the All-Star break. He's had a couple of goods, but mostly bads. How can you put him on the mound in Philly or Arizona or wherever it would be in Game 3 and say, we trust that you're going to be able to get through this order? I think the Braves, like most teams, but I think the Braves' formula to winning the championship is we think we have the best bats. We think we have a really good bullpen, but we can't play out of holes. Last night was nice to come back from 6-0. You don't want to live that life, and unfortunately, Bryce is digging you holes.
His last 13 starts, guys, he's gone just 68 and 2/3 innings. He's got an ERA north of 5 over that span. Opponent's hitting .257. He does get a lot of ground balls, but when he's not getting the ground balls and when folks are laying off the sinker, or when sinkers and changeups are left up, that's a recipe for trouble, and you've seen that here down the stretch with him.
So the second inning last night was not his fault, but when you don't miss bats a lot, you do get the chance of soft contact hurting you. But the walks are the killers. It can't live in the postseason like that. Now, I've heard a lot of people complaining that if that was the postseason last night, it kills you. Bryce doesn't get out of the third last night.
Yes.
We all know that the hook is so short in the postseason that leash, once it's 2-0 and you get a runner on a third, you're going to get him. So you're not allowing somebody to dig you that kind of hole. I don't care who the starter is.
Well, and even if he's having success, I'm not sure how many game 3 starters across any team are even going to get through a lineup more than 1.5 times nowadays, right? So, I mean, even if you are going bullpen game, it's not like the other guy that you're facing is going 6 or something
I fully admit I don't watch a bunch of other teams play baseball. I don't. And I know a lot of our listeners are the same. But last night watching the Cubs play essentially what was a playoff game. They're using Drew Smyly in the 8th because their bullpen is gassed, because their bullpen hasn't been great at times. It's all relative. Like, everybody in baseball's got pitching stuff they're worried about. The Braves are not alone. It just so happens the Braves can sometimes mash their way through the problems.
And that's, again, you're going to face top-tier starters just about every single night in the postseason.
But are you, though? I think you're going to face ones. I don't know that we have top tier as much as we think anymore.
That's true.
The Dodgers are broken with their pitching.
And that's kind of what I was getting at, too. I mean, outside Milwaukee's the one team whose starters I sit there and say, okay, they got some, offensively, they are anemic.
Right.
I mean,
they always are that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I still think this is a Braves offense that can hit good pitching. And to Matt's point, like I said, going game 3, there's nobody who's really all that excited about their game 3 starter.
At all.
It's just not.
You get to the point where you have 1.5 starters, you really like, where the Braves, if Max is right, you'll take Max and Strider and feel great about it.
Well, look, I think we can all agree the one team that you probably don't want to see is Philadelphia, but it was funny. I was talking to their announcers last week when they were here, and I said, there's a lot of folks in this town that don't want to see you guys, and they said, well, believe us, there's a lot of folks back north that don't want any part of this Braves ball club either, because Atlanta has had Philadelphia's number here the last couple of years.
And I would put it this way. Like, if you're looking at the landscape of both leagues, if there's one team I could tell you to stay away from, everybody would say Atlanta. Yeah. Why would you want to deal with this 3 times or 4 times through the order to deal with this lineup? No.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. We got 5 games left to go in the regular year. Take a couple of days off next week and then get back at it. We know the Braves' magic number to clinch the home field advantage throughout the National League playoffs is 1. Any combination of their wins and Dodger losses. Hopefully that happens here tonight. What's coming up on the big afternoon program here today, sir?
Gosh, we have a lot to cover today, including what happened last night. We'll get the Chicago side of things because it was quite the entertaining, let's say, fallout from the drop ball heard and seen around the world. So we'll take folks to Chicago to get that side of the coin coming up. We'll also have our friend Aaron Murray stop by and talk about the Dogs this weekend. We'll get ready for the Falcons heading to London. And again, the magic number gets smaller for the Braves. So we'll have all that coming up.
You guys got lots to get to. Wiley, we got to get out of their way.
We do. And I'm excited to tune in. I got a sandwich ready to roll, and I'm going to enjoy it.
There you go. All right, well, listen, Chuck and Chernoff are coming up next. We'll see you tonight at 6:05 for the Ford Leadoff Show, Braves and Cubs, Game 2, 7:20. Wiley, always good to have you in studio. We'll do it again soon.
Always a pleasure, Kevin.
All right, Chuck and Chernoff are next, right here on your home of the Braves, the Fan 680 and 93.7 FM.